So our topic this week is fats, lipids. Um, and my little motto is there such a thing as a healthy fat? Um, and there is. Unfortunately, as you can see in that picture, there's something called a very unhealthy fat. And these unhealthy fats are really new in the past 100 years because of processing. So we're still looking at all the processing of stuff. And before I continue, I want to make sure I remember to mention, you guys have class presentations. Your first set are in 2 weeks. And I decided to refine it a little bit more to a food additive. So rather than just the whole food, to pick a specific food additive. So that could be like one of the fake sugars, to look into that. Or you might get a spark of something here today, or it could be a food coloring, or something they add, like actually to a lot of the creamers and the non-dairy milks, is something called Kerrigan, which I found I actually had a huge sensitivity to. So I only get soy milk like from the tofu store where they don't add stuff. So I think that would be actually really fun for us to look at. So as you have an idea, you can either email me or talk to me and so on. All right. Let's see if this thing gets stuck. There we go. And so these are some of the healthy fats, and you can make it so you can get rid of all the people, so you just see the screen too. So nuts. So part of your 7-day challenge this week is you're going to cut out the processed oils, and we'll be talking about that today. And there are some healthy fats. So I call it the nutty week, that you're going to be eating nuts. The nut talk will be more on Wednesday. And so just a comment about that. It's not like all you're eating is nuts, obviously. And you're not doing like a whole bag of nuts each day. It's a handful. And there's so many different types, or seeds. It could be seeds also, or avocados. So if you're still like avocados, the avocados are considered a healthier fat. And this is part of the problem with fat, and why fats have gotten a bad name, and they should, because this is highly processed fat. And the big thing with fat is whenever, I don't have the video on here, but you can Google it. If you've never seen a video of when they do open heart surgery, they actually will pull, this is fat that is coating around, around the artery and within the artery, and eventually will clog it up so that the flow of blood can't happen through the artery. Part of this is any extra calories. You should emphasize this, and I'll continue to emphasize it. Any extra calories you eat. So if you're eating food that is processed, it's going to be extra calories, because your body's going to digest it faster than it's supposed to. And again, when they're making it and adding the fiber with it, it still is going to get processed fast. And so it's going to give a flood to your body, and your body's going to see it as extra calorie. This includes protein. So whether it's fat, protein, or carbohydrates, and again, it's the highly processed ones, they're going to get stored as fat, because that's what our body does, and our body stores them as saturated fats. And so it doesn't matter what kind of fats or carbs or protein you ate, it's going to get stored as saturated fat and cholesterol. So the misnomer is, if you're eating saturated fat, that's how you become fat, which is not actually quite correct. And the one exception would be if we start eating whole food. So going back, eating how our great grandparents ate, or our grandparents, or even your teacher when she was a young girl. So berry season is around the corner. Berries, your body, because of the fiber in there, your body's going to process them in the correct way, and you're going to use them as energy or store them as glycogen. And so that was just a reminder for me to make the comment I just made. And so they always show the the heart is worried about saturated fats in your diet, which is going to be animal fats. And yeah, I mentioned this in class that we actually don't have a bliss point for fat. So for sugar, we do. And that's why we all gravitate towards like different fruit. Like I was mentioning before, I'm not a huge fan of star fruit because apparently it doesn't hit my bliss point, but the pink lady apples are my absolute favorite. But when they do it with fat, there is no bliss point. It's more is better. And the industry has figured that out, and they, yeah, they have learned how to add and what type of fat. And we'll talk about that because trans fat is actually might be our bliss point. And so that's why butter. You can always add more butter. Adding butter, I'm my last name's Sherpa. The Sherpas have to eat butter. I'm pretty sure they add butter to their tea. I have some pictures of that in a little bit. And for children, adding a little bit of butter will get them to eat things. So I don't have a problem with butter. All right, sorry. It's how to forward my slides. Yeah, and if you leave anything with fat in it, like the butter out on the table and run to get something else, your cat will lose all of their manners. And if you have a dog, same with ice cream and stuff. So the broader category, and so I want to remind you, for those of you here, that part of your weekly assignment is taking notes and stuff. And so, and it's up to you. Some people take really fluid, fun notes. And then those of you listening along, that I do need to see the notes. So really, fat is a type of lipid. Lipid is the biochemical term, and what it means, good review for those of you who've had Chem 106, is anything that is water insoluble, anything that doesn't mix with water in our body is called a lipid. And things that don't mix with water, so you can think of oil and fat, what happens when you put them in water, because we're like 80% water, is they float to the top. And so if we didn't have a way to keep them mixed, which is emulsifiers, we would be fatheads because all the fat would float to our head. And that's not my joke, but I love that joke. But it's called, the term for that is hydrophobic. And so hydrophobic is, hydro is water and phobic is fear. And so this is not like a human emotion fear. It cannot mix with water. So things that are non-polar, if you've had chemistry. And so they're hydrophobic. They're going to be mostly made of carbon and hydrogen. And again, we're going to draw some of these out. It's not a chemistry class, I recognize that, but if you see some of these and try doing the zigzags and stuff, it does help to understand where the correct information is and where the misinformation is, and the people who really are just posting stuff that's completely opinionated and stuff. There's so many types of lipids, and they have different purposes depending on how they're formed, what they're combined with biochemically, which is very different from carbohydrates. So carbohydrates had one purpose. Does anybody remember what their one purpose was?
Their energy.
Yes. Yay, Amber got it. She heard this talk last week. So. They are
camera.
Yeah.
Like, how do you mute?
Yeah, you just kind of have to start talking because I took the pictures off the camera, so it won't be recording you if you ever. But anyway, carbohydrates are our storage of energy and our source of energy. Our cells use blood glucose. Fat is also a storage, and we'll see that when we talk about some of the purposes. Yeah. So lipids are absolutely necessary in our diet. There's a lot of misinformation about too much, too little. And so that's my hope. In this week, we might actually end up going into next week. I told my Chem 106 class, if I could do a whole term on just fats and lipids. And most nutrition classes probably spend an hour, maybe 2 hours on them, and probably just teach you that saturated fats are bad, cholesterol is bad, and unsaturated is good, which is actually not 100% true. And so we end up with dis-ease. And so if you've never seen the word disease spelled correctly, it's It's a lack of ease is where the word comes from. And it makes you start looking at that word. And we live in a society, our healthcare is not healthcare, it's disease care. And so we're just putting band-aids on things. True healthcare in ancient China, the doctor was paid if you were healthy. If you became sick, he wasn't paid. And so if he was healthy, that's when he was paid. This is actually a slide again. I plagiarized, and it just was when I was Googling for something yesterday. I was just amazed that we just have really perpetuated this, that, you know, over on the right, the nuts and the salmon and the seeds are healthy, unsaturated fats are healthy. And the thing, and that saturated fats, which is the animal fats, are bad for you. But when I looked at the picture, that's not actually what I see. I see processed on the one side and whole food on the other side, which is not the difference between saturated and unsaturated. And that's my big take home message for you to recognize. It's not animal versus plant. I am plant-based. I don't eat meat, although I'm making salmon today because somebody gave me some for Joey's birthday. Yeah, and it's not about saturated and unsaturated. And when I make salmon, I always make it with cilantro because there's the whole mercury thing, and cilantro helps to protect you from mercury. Anyway, little fast fact I learned like 25 years ago. All right, so to understand fats, we have to do some chemistry. And this picture is from my biochemistry book, and it summarizes everything beautifully. So those little black circles are carbons, and the little grayish ones attached to them are hydrogens. And carbons always make 4 bonds. And the red balls are oxygen. And oxygens, when we did carbohydrates, there were lots of oxygens. You know, every once in a while when I showed a picture, and those of you who've taken the biochemistry with me, you start looking at the pictures more. And whenever you see lots of oxygens, it's going to mix with water, which is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates love water. That's why they have hydrate in their name. Lipids, on the other hand, are almost all carbon. They're almost all these black balls. And they have that little area that's just going to allow them to do a reaction. And this shows you the different types of fatty acids that we'll be going through. So the numbers after the name. So if you look here with stearic acid, the 18 for each one of them is telling you that's what they all have in common. And that's how many carbons they have. That's how many black balls they have there. And the number, the second number, the 0, 1, 2, or 3, is telling you how many double bonds there are between carbons. So the stearic acid would be 0, oleic is 1, linoleic is 2, and the linolenic, or alpha-linolenic would be the correct name, would be 3. And what do you notice? I mean, some of you have had this before, so just take a deep breath, but what do you notice? Each time you add a double bond, what is happening to that fatty acid? And my nutrition teacher, he was a teacher at the nutrition at the naturopathic college. He always called it a kink. And that actually, to me, I love that term because it really helped it sink in. That double bond creates a kink. And so it makes them kinkier. Each one you add, it gets more and more kinky. And so the first one, the stearic acid, is called a saturated fatty acid. I'm going to put the words up, and I always cringe when I add words because I don't remember what my words say, and students get caught up in the words. Maybe I should talk first. So this is all single bonds, and it is saturated. So you've all heard the term saturated fatty acid, and I'll be abbreviating it as SFA. This is part of why I was like, oh, I wish I could do this one in person. So I have the board and the PowerPoint, which I can't do as easily on Zoom. And what they do, because there is this little zigzagging going on, they stack up. And when things are straight like this, they stack up and they form a clot. And that was that picture I showed you previously of the blood clots. Is saturated fats are going to make blood clots. And that is true. And that's why saturated fats have gotten such a bad name. And they deserve that name because they are in blood clots. The thing that we got wrong is how we end up making so many saturated fats. Because when you eat it in your diet, your body is going to, some of it's going to be broken down. All right, when you add a kink, this is called a monounsaturated fatty acid, so MUFA. So one double bond is monounsaturated. And then the 2 or 3, and there's even a 4 and a 5, which are really rare. Those are called polyunsaturated. So a double bond means unsaturated. It means to make this bond here, it might be hard to see at the kinks, but you lose hydrogens. And so saturated means it has maximum hydrogens on the carbon. And when you make a double bond, you lose hydrogens, and that causes a kink to happen. And that kink means it can't stack up anymore. And so it doesn't form a blood clot. And so that's why there's been this huge emphasis. In fact, in 1990, McDonald's got rid of deep frying in animal fat, in saturated fat, and started deep frying in unsaturated fat. French fries were already unhealthy. They probably made them even more unhealthy. So we can't stack them up anymore, but we're going to see there's another problem. That's a big problem also. So they're both big problems. So saturated fats stack up, unsaturated fats are fluid. They have a kink. All right, so we'll do words. You don't need to know that unless you're in biochemistry. They're carboxylic acids. So that's where the term fatty acid comes from. So that's a double oxygen. And they're just going to be these long chains of carbons. So that's, and this is just like a fun fact. You don't have to write this down. They're actually always an even number of carbons in our body. And that just has to do with how we metabolize. Because again, these are made, the saturated fatty acids in our body are made from the breakdown of all our extra food. And so all our food, extra food that we can't use immediately for energy, our liver breaks it down into 2 carbon units and then puts it back together. So it's like Legos. You break it down into two Legos, and then you put it back together, always as a saturated fat. It's the fastest way to do it, or cholesterol. And so the double bond is important. Hopefully you can all answer that question, because it makes it fluid. It no longer stacks. And so it makes it kinky or fluid. And the reason it's a kink is that word at the bottom. It is cis, so the CIS, and hopefully I have a better picture of that, but there's 2 ways the double bond can be made, and you've all heard of the other way. And so the cis makes it kinky in nature. All right, so this is a picture, and hopefully from that brief introduction, you could all look at that, and these zigzags, those green zigzags, tell you what type of fatty acid. Every single one of these, none of them have a kink. So every single one of these is a saturated fatty acid. And what happens in our body is this molecule in purple hooks up to 3 fatty acids. It's always going to be 3. Well, not always, but for here, for storage. And it's a quick way to store a lot of carbons. So our food is carbons. The carbons, those bonds between the carbons are electrons. So whenever you took chemistry, and that's what our food needs, that's what our cells need, are the electrons. And this is just a really effective way of storing electrons, is as carbons. Oxygens are greedy and the electrons aren't stored as well. And so that's why we store it as fat, because it's all those zigzags are carbons. And so we'll see again, does anybody, some of you took biochemistry with me, any of you remember the biochemical term we have for fat?
What, lipid?
So thank you for answering like that, Stephen. I set you up and that was perfect. So a lipid is anything that's hydrophobic. A fat is only one specific type of lipid. So cholesterol is also a lipid. We will see the eicosanoids. That's like our next one, which are the ones found that our body makes, the cytokines and stuff, the prostaglandins, which are really good guys. And like our cell membranes, our phospholipids and stuff. A fat is one specific type of lipid. And so the words are not perfectly interchangeable. A fat is a triglyceride. So it means just means there's 3 fatty acids always stuck on this molecule. So you will see them on medical charts as TG or triglyceride. And it's just saying there's 3 fatty acids on there. And it's a measurement. When we have a lot of triglycerides floating around in our blood, it means our body's getting too many fast calories and it's storing these. And it's absolutely reversible with lifestyle, with eating whole food, not overeating. When you eat whole food, you can't overeat, and getting some exercise, right? Not having a sedentary lifestyle. So there's the word triglyceride. And so fats and oils are both triglycerides. We use them for cooking, right? And so you can see they have those 3 long chains with them. And you can also see, this is a really nice slide because it shows you, A is showing you all saturated. So you can see they're stacking up because there's no kinks. And then B, we see unsaturated. So UFA. So the saturated are abbreviated as SFA for saturated fatty acid and UFA for unsaturated fatty acid. And so those kinks, we can see it's not going to stack up. It's not going to clot. It's going to create fluidity, which we think of as Bravo. A mistake that is perpetuated is that fats are saturated and oils are unsaturated. That's not 100% true. The actual terminology is a fat comes from animals and an oil comes from plants. Animal fats are almost always saturated, but not always. And plants, triglycerides are almost always unsaturated, but again, not always. And I show that I think it's the slide after this. I did want to mention what the function of triglycerides are. And again, this is not all lipids. Every lipid has a specific function. So in our body, fats, so an animal, triglyceride function, the polar bear is there because it is, they actually lose 50% of their fat when they go into hibernation. And that is what tells you right there what the fat is doing for them, which is multiple things. One is it's storing energy. It becomes their energy source because they're not going to eat for, I forget how many months. And for us also, as I keep saying, it's an efficient way to store energy. And that's more words that you don't need to write down. These are your notes. So what you pick up and think about, something some of you are doing. Some of you like to write the notes very precise, which is great. And some of you, that's why I encourage you to write questions, things that it makes you think about that you want to look into more. But again, as I mentioned, because it's so many carbons, the carbon has a higher oxidation state, which just means it stores electrons better, because that's what you need from your food. That's why, yeah, you also need the vibes from your food. That's really what you need. And it's insulation. So your animals, if you have a dog or a cat, my dog, she gets like her winter fur, but they also get a little bit, besides becoming fluffier, we do tend to have more fat in the winter time to insulate. And then especially animals that are in cold climates, it's a big deal. And the polar bears are super cute. It's a shock absorber. So pregnancy, I have there as a note. It's kind of cool that I'm doing this talk today because this is the day I gave birth. But it is when a woman is pregnant, even when they're not pregnant, we have a lot of fat. Not a lot, but we have fat around our uterus. And when you become pregnant, you actually get more fat in that area because you're protecting the most precious thing that you ever have in your body, which is the child. And so it's protecting that area. And it's also a space filler. So most of our fat is in the middle part of our body. So it's we don't want all of our organs to fall into each other. So we do need some space in between, but not like that picture I showed at the beginning of the artery. We don't want this coating around it. Or I showed a picture, I think the first day, of kidneys that now have coating around the kidneys and are crushing the kidneys. And yeah, so that's not a good thing. Oh, and this one's important. So we will get to vitamins eventually. And I kind of laugh saying that because we've created this misconception that there's certain vitamins and they're the ones that have letters. Those were just the first ones that were isolated when we started learning how to isolate molecules. There's millions, billions of vitamins, and you can only get them from whole food. They don't have the same effect in supplement form. With that said, though, of course, if you have a specific disease going on, that you might need to take some extra vitamin C or something. But there are certain vitamins, and again, expanding that into a whole world of nutrients that are fat soluble, meaning they're hydrophobic. So they're actually considered lipids. And those are A, D, E, and K. And actually an easier way to remember it is they're not B and C. So they put a lot of letters in there and later found out they weren't vitamins. But A, D, E, and K are considered lipids because they're actually hydrophobic vitamins. And we'll see some of these. Your second presentations, you guys are going to pick one of the vitamins or minerals, and we'll look a little bit at these. And then we'll finally look at the bigger picture of phytochemicals that are amazing. Oh, and as far as culinary, they make food more delicious. So the low fat fad that we are still perpetuating, they actually just added more sugar because you had that, the food, it also fills you up like fiber. And so I'm not saying to go on a the high fat diets have issues, but having some fat in your food is actually something that helps you to feel satisfaction on your mouth, on your taste buds and stuff. Right. And so that's our if you're going to have ice cream, do the real deal. And you will actually eat a lot less of it than getting the fat-free, sugar-free ice cream. You end up overeating. It's highly processed, has a lot of not so good additives. All right, this is the slide I promised a moment ago. It's a really cool slide because it actually shows the different types of oils. About 2/3 of the way down, you see lard, and then beef tallow and butter fat. So the yellow is saturated. So those are the ones that stack up. So when we get into the animal products at the bottom, they're mostly saturated fats, or about 50% saturated. And then coconut oil is almost all saturated. And I will get to coconut oil either today or on Wednesday. So coconut oil is called an oil because it comes from a plant, but it is actually almost all saturated fats. And it's a specific type. It's medium chain saturated fats, which is another fad. As soon as they make it a fad, it becomes not so good. But the oils are the ones that have been glorified because they mostly are the greens and the purples. So the greens are one double bond, monounsaturated. That's what the term, that might be what you say you learned today is, hey, now I know what the difference between saturated and unsaturated. And I don't care if you know it means a double bond, it means you have one kink. And then the purple were glorified. So safflower oil for a while was like the best that you could have because it had just so many kinks in it. And we've highly processed these and caused a problem that I will get to. Avocados are, I think, the fourth one down. Yeah, they're the one that they have a lot of monounsaturated, and you're not going to cook with them. You're eating them whole, and so that monounsaturated makes them really wonderful. And then the olive oil is two down from it, and it's like 77%. And especially that one, olive oil has very little of the purple, and olives, because of how we make olive oil, it's processed different. And so those two still aren't good for you because it's oil. If you eat an avocado or olives, that's different from the oil. let's leave it at that. Same with peanuts. So all of these, this whole food would be good, but not as the oil, because you have to process to make oil. So this is another one of the slides I want to come back to that just made me laugh. So it does say we go from bad to just crap. And the cupcake at the top is not like the muffins I made for you guys, but Joey wanted chocolate muffins. It is crap. It has the sugar and stuff, and everybody talks about the sugar, but it also has more than likely highly refined oils and lipids in it. The bad and the junk, I really think they can go together, but the junk is that we are deep frying in unsaturated fats, and that takes potato, which is this beautiful food, and made it into something that is really unhealthy for your body. I don't agree with the worst. Butter in small amounts is not going to be, well, we'll look at that. And pizza, unfortunately, now has a lot of oils. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. So I find this slide interesting again, because they're saying choose unsaturated and stay away from saturated. But if you really look at what they're saying choose whole foods and choose towards plant-based. Some of the things in there, I guess that's supposed to be fish in there, so somebody's artistic abilities are a little bit better than mine. And then they're showing donuts, which actually donuts and the chips, and they're saying stay away from these because they're saturated. But those are deep fried in unsaturated, and it's the deep frying that causes, it's the preparation of the food. Hot dogs really aren't good, and that's why everybody's confused and going what's going on. And it's really simple: eat whole foods. This is a picture I actually took in Nepal, so 10-12 years ago now. And those are yaks. That's a mama yak and a baby yak, and I'm really that close. I did not use the super lens to get that close. I'm like really like 2 feet away from them. And the horns on that yak are really over a foot. They're like 2 feet. And anyway, they're just beautiful. They're every possible color you can imagine. And she's nursing her baby. We're really high up here. We just come over the pass. And you can actually see in the background the glacier waters coming down that are going to feed anyway, purest water in the world coming from the Himalayas, it feels like. But this was we had to stay at the cheese factory in Nepal. And this was a question. I don't know if Amber and Josie remember the answer because we did this last week, but it always blows me away how many pounds of milk it takes to just make 1 pound of butter. So, and the answer, yeah, so we take butter and we can make it into cream, and I'm sorry, we take milk and then the cream and then the butter. This is then we stayed at the cheese factory, and this is the guys bringing the milk in from their yaks. They use these tump lines on their head to carry these milk. And so the answer is 21.2 pounds of milk. So they had to bring, I can't remember the number now, and I can't believe I don't remember it. How many of those containers they're carrying to make the butter at the cheese factory. In the Sherpa and Tibetan culture, they light butter lamps, and so fats burn really well, like they do in our body. And so they make candles out of butter, and they light them in gratitude for everything. And so these are huge things. Just I'm trying to imagine how much yak's milk has to go into this. And so if you go into any of the Tibetan Buddhist monasteries and stuff outside, you can buy the little candles made out of butter to light in there. And this is just a picture. This is the highest monastery in the world. It's right below the north side of Mount Everest. And this is the head nun there. We're in the tea house. And she came over and brought us butter tea. And so they make their tea when you're at high elevation, you need to eat fat. You need your body. Yeah. And so they mix butter with their tea, and it sounds weird. You can actually get it here now. But it's yak butter, and I absolutely loved it. They don't have, I don't think there was sugar or anything, but she came over because Pimba, so this is the real Sherpa in the picture, and there's Joey 12 years ago. And she brought it over because she'd heard us talking about Pimba had 20 years before that been to climb Everest on the Tibetan side, and the head Lama had been very ill and he had brought medicine to him. And she heard Pimba mention something, and so she came over and served us in gratitude for something he had done. And so that is something in these cultures of the gratitude with your food. Anyway, it just brings back lots of fun memories for me. And so we're going to talk about trans fats. So saturated fats, again, are bad because they have double bonds. I'm sorry, they don't have double bonds. They stack up. They're linear. They just do a zigzag and they stack up. And so you've all heard of trans fats. I'm assuming if there's any questions, you guys would just ask, talk. It's the hardest part on Zoom. There's a lot less interaction. So trans fats mean junk food. Anything that's processed has trans fats. Used to really have trans fats, and it was a texture thing. It gave it a texture that was just bliss to people when they ate them. Oreo cookies apparently cannot be made without trans fats. They trans fats, and also fast food with trans fats. So this is a picture of what trans fat is. So you lose the kink. So the blue balls, the black, the blue there are hydrogens, but the kink was cis. So I mentioned that in nature, they're cis. So they create the kink. And then the trans, suddenly you still have that double bond there, which is going to be important for where I go after the trans. But it's now going to be stackable. And so they made these during World War II. There was a shortage of butter because we had to kill the cows because they were eating our food because we were during the Great Depression. And so they were trying to find another way to make something to put on your bread, which why not make it honey, get honey from the bees. But and so they came up with trans fats, which if you take an oil, which they could get from the corn or whatever, and they heat it up and put some hydrogens in, not all of them. When they heat it up, that breaks the double bond. And then when it comes back, the enzyme's not there to make it a cis. And so a lot of it comes back as trans, and it gives you a solid texture. And your heart should be running from these. These are pure evil. And it's why they have to show up on labels, and they're no longer, or much less is added to food. So there is absolutely trans fats in that, because when you deep fry in any kind of oil, if you're deep frying in oil, that high temperature is creating trans fats. So they have to label that no trans fats are added, but the way that it's then cooked is creating trans fats. And you can see all the oil just dripping off of all this food. All right. So the little pig is there because in the 70s, might have even been in the 60s, pig farmers started not taking table scraps from people who used margarine. So they started in the early 70s is when, it may have been the 60s, but it was in the early 70s when they started doing the open heart surgeries. I think it was the 70s, because my sister had open heart surgery in 74, and that was like a huge deal because there was only 2 hospitals in our country, and I think in the world, that could do it. But when they would pull out, and my sister had a hole in her heart that had to be repaired, so it was totally different story. But when they went in and did and pulled out, they found that was always saturated fat around these hearts, or in autopsies they'd find these people had these heart attacks. It was just coating, their heart was just covered with saturated fats, and they could see in the arteries it was just filled with saturated fats. And so they started telling people, don't eat butter, don't eat don't eat eggs because it's high in cholesterol. And they started saying, eat margarine and eat egg beaters, these highly processed man-made things. And the pig farmers would get the scraps from these people's tables, and their pigs would die like pretty fast before they could fatten them up for the slaughter. And so pig farmers banned margarine scraps from being fed to the pigs back in the early 70s. And so, which is, rats also will not touch, mice, rodents will not touch trans fats, and ants will not touch trans fats. They would not go around sucralose. They also won't go around trans fats. You leave butter out, everything's going to go for the butter. And then the reduced fat margarine, that's hysterical, because what is it then? It's the thing that's interesting here also, and if you have any of the fake butters at home, put it in your hand or leave it out. They don't melt. They like do a plastic thing. They're basically like eating plastic. But some of the things linked to trans fats, cardiovascular disease. So CVD is cardiovascular disease. So increased heart disease and cancer. For women, when they started doing like looking at biopsies from breast cancer, or when they do the thing where they remove the breast, the mastectomy, and analyze it, they would find high levels of trans fats, because your body doesn't know what to do with these. They're not natural. So when we take them in, our liver goes, what the heck is that? And just sends it off to be stored. And you store it in the fatty tissue, so prostate and breast. And so that it took us those several decades after the pig farmers banned it. So nurse study, is one of the biggest studies. It's still going on. My mom's actually one of the participants, and they send them these handouts. And it was initially all nurses, and so my mom was a chemist. I don't know how she got in on this study, but every couple of years she gets this form, and it's pages and pages long, and they fill it out about anything that's been going on for them. And in the nurses study for breast cancer, trans fats were the #1 culprit. I don't know what year that was of the nurse study, and I apologize for that. Inflammation, we'll talk about that. Anything processed is going to cause inflammation, and that is probably the biggest issue people are having. Everybody's in pain. Everybody has an autoimmune, and they're like, oh, I don't know what's wrong. Oh, give me a drug. You got to start eating healthy and trust your body will heal. Your immune system, like I said, autoimmune, it changes your insulin response. So diabetes, high blood sugar is the effect. The cause is our overconsumption of processed food, including, so trans fats gum up the area around the insulin receptor. So the insulin receptor can't do its thing. Our fat tissue changes, our detox changes, our cholesterol changes. We'll talk about prostaglandins. You get abnormal sperm, you get your membranes, get everything. There's like nothing good about these. There's nothing good, and mold doesn't grow on it. So if you actually have margarine at your house, don't eat it anymore, and then leave it out for the next like century, and nothing will happen to it. It will still be there. Insects, or use it to like keep the ants away maybe. And so mold won't grow on it. You can put it in a mouse trap and no mice will come. They like peanut butter. They like real food. So that's trans fat city, because everything there is deep fried. And when you deep fry, except for the soda, which is just pure sugar. So they started, studies were coming out from Harvard in the 90s. Again, fast food, because highly processed. And that was a picture of saying, that's a statue for David. And then David, if he was a modern David, would of course be obese. So 1993, so 20 years after the pig farmers, Harvard finally does the study, because we require studies to say, hello, trans fats absolutely are related to cardio heart disease, chronic heart disease, I think that is. It then takes another 13 years before our Food and Drug Administration says we need labels on this food. And then I go to see my mom's in New Jersey, and I see her every year at Christmas. And so I was there this year, and I remember this. And so on New Year's Day, they could not have trans fats in anything, in any restaurant, and a whole bunch of restaurants had to close down because they couldn't do it. And so they had to actually take away this ban on trans fats in New York City. It is there again now because they had to give them time to figure out how to do it, which is they still modify and stuff. But anyway, so apparently these chains say that they went trans free, but again, they're deep frying, which is creating trans fats as well as a bigger issue. And then it takes another like 7 years before the FDA looks at banning them completely. And they suggest that if we did ban trans fats, that it would prevent this many heart attacks. There you go. Our government is looking after us. These are some of the worst foods for trans fats. And it is those breakfast pastries. Anything that's fried, so salty snacks and fried food, breads, desserts, pastries, it's in there. And they have to label now how much is in there. And so we also see, kind of like the high fructose corn syrup, that the trend peaks around 2005. It's amazing anybody's still alive right after 2005, and then the trend flattens or it actually decreases. Yet our trend of obesity continues to skyrocket, and we'll see why in a moment. So butter does have, butter had mostly saturated. It has a little bit of unsaturated. So when you cook with butter, you can create some trans fats. There's a little bit of trans fats naturally in dairy products when they do the homogenization and pasteurization. I can't remember exactly now. Anyway, eating whole foods, there's no trans fats in the real whole foods. So in vegetables, based plant-based foods, you're fine if they're not deep fried. And so this is a picture of, they're eating the Kraken and they're saying hooray. So trans fats would be like the Kraken, and now we label our foods. And that actually is one of the things, you get to go back and look at 2 labels. You can do the same 2 labels, or you can pick 2 other ones. And if it's not something you have in your house, it could be something you used to eat or a friend eats or your mom eats, and you want to look at it. And they'll label it. And most things have either 0 grams of trans fats, no added trans fats, or less than 1. And you're going to look at more than that. You're going to look at the saturated and polyunsaturated, because I think this is really important. In my other class, my Chem 106, how many of the students, they don't look at labels, and most of them had nutrition, and I don't understand how they didn't look at labels, or they only care about the sodium content or only the trans fat. Like, there's no trans fat, it's good. But this picture is there because it's not about the trans fats. That was something that was bad. It was a man-made process, but we can see what's eating the Kraken is something that's going to cause a bigger problem, and it's just lurking right there. And it is oil. It is our cooking oil, the beautiful sunflower. So all of your oils are so processed, and we're going to see why this is a huge problem. And again, I couldn't tell you which is the #1 problem. You gotta get rid of refined. You gotta eat real food. And so one of the documentaries, I think it's a list of 4 documentaries for this week. They're shorter ones again, so you're gonna pick 2 of them. Anyway, this is a slide. Stephen gets credit. He had mentioned this, and I found it really easily, but it shows beyond 2005. It was more me having the time to start updating my slides, which you guys are blessed to see that. And so the dotted line is this increase in obesity. We can see there's actually a little blip around 2005 when it leaves off. So high fructose corn syrup, trans fats are getting like the bad name at the same time in the early 2000s. And this is interesting if you ponder what's going on politically. So 2001, everything. And so we see a decrease in those things. Now, the thing that's interesting is all the other ones, like butter is pretty much a flat line. And our selling cooking oils, though, are the piece that is not. Margarine does see a decrease. That there is, again, the other thing I showed in another slide that shows a perfect correlation is the increase in advertisements. I don't have a TV, so I'm not aware of this, but it's not an advertisement for sunflower oil. It's the processing of food. And so if you're somebody who eats granola bars, or if you're doing the Fruit Loops, it's going in. Everything has oils, added oils, usually 2 or 3 types. And that is a huge problem. And that's, yeah, there's, and this is why. So the official chemical term, scientific term is peroxidation. UFA, again, means unsaturated fatty acids. I just keep looking at my time. And hopefully if we're in person on Wednesday, we can do some sketches on the board. I have everything ready to do it here, but it's really hard on Zoom to do it as easily, but maybe at the end we'll do some sketches. So oxidation is the key word. And if you took chemistry, I asked this, nobody ever remembers, but when I teach it as Leo Gur. So see, I should have dressed up as the lion. I was like, what can I dress up as today? But you lose electrons. And so these unsaturated fatty acid, it's because they have a double bond. What oxidation is it's what rust is. So when you leave iron outside or any of the metals and they start rusting, that is what's happening when you eat unsaturated fatty acids. And that has already happened when it's in the bottle, when it's in the processed food, because they've processed it. They heat it to high temperatures, they cause it even more. They're causing you to basically make your body rust on the inside. And so all that food and more, really what I need is granola bars, protein shakes, all that stuff. The more ingredients they have, and so you have to eat whole foods. And so it was really wonderful doing that. I thank you for all sharing at the beginning today. They say that you attract the people who are like you. And I also feel as a teacher, you also attract the people who are ready to learn. And you all said you already ate a lot of fruit, which is really not normal. If you go and look at people, when you go to the grocery store, this will probably be next week's assignment or in a couple of weeks, is looking at not judging them, but looking at what is in other people's carts. And there's very little fruit in people's carts. And so all of you sound like you're the exception, that you go to the store. I just go specifically to buy fruit. You have to go more often. But if you look at like in Europe and Asia and Africa, they have the markets and you go outside and they're there and they're selling, like in all the movies, they're selling fruits and vegetables. They're not selling granola bars. And so anyway, so oxidation means losing electrons, and you have to have a double bond for this to happen. Saturated fats do not have a double bond. Anything with double bonds, this is going to happen. And these guys create free radicals. We talked about free radicals and we talked about sugar. Sugar creates free radicals in your body, and free radicals mean you suddenly you're missing an electron. These guys steal electrons from the cells in your body. And then think of it like your cell membrane is like the walls around your house, and suddenly there's holes all over the place. And what's going to happen if you're sitting inside right now and there's holes in your walls? Well, it's snowing in April in Gresham, and you're going to eventually get really cold. And you're going to be like, how do I plug up the holes? And plugging the holes isn't really going to help if the holes keep being made. So we don't want to our body will plug up the holes. Sleep is extremely important because that's how your body repairs itself. But you need to stop making the holes. And so you have to stop using oils. And so there's a picture. The evil gray guy is the free radical. The one thing that's nice on Zoom is you can actually see the slides, because and so he's stealing an electron and it steals an electron. It's just this chain reaction. That poor guy at the end is like how Josie felt last week when she was sick, and we've all been there. And so your immune system actually does this to bugs. It has a way of creating free radicals and killing the bugs. And so that's all the gunk that comes out of us when we're sick. But all oil is rancid. They actually add bleach. Same thing you add to your clothes to make them whiter. They add bleach to oils so you can't see that they're already oxidized. If you have oil in your house, you can make soap with it. Actually, you can't. You have to have saturated. Just get rid of it. It should be toxic waste. There's 4 things that make oxidized fatty acids, ways that you're making it. And the number one way is high temperatures. So deep frying, absolutely. Even just frying in oil. So people will just put a little bit of oil. So in Asia, they do use a little bit of, and these guys have lots of PUFAs. They use a lot of sesame oil, which has a number of double bonds in it, but they're putting such a little bit amount. Your guys' challenge though for the week is, can you learn to cook without oil? I thought it was impossible. Gosh, it must be 4 years ago now. Absolutely changed how I cook, how I prepare meal. And you just use water in place of it. You just have to have water present. You have to be present. You have to have everything prepared. I make my own soup broth. You also can't broil. The broiler, again, I talked about this, maybe not with this class, my other class. The broiler is the, when you open the oven, it's the thing on the top of the oven that sends heat down. Mine's never actually been used, or not by me. I don't know if other people used it. My oven is kind of broken right now. It can't get above, anytime you heat above 375, my oven actually can't get above 360 right now. And so my ovens, yeah, which is okay because I don't have to go above that temperature. All right, so high temperatures. So how fast food, how processed food is created, it goes to a high temperature. And how the oil in the store is processed, the processing of it, they actually go to 450 degrees. And that creates oxidation, that creates trans fats, but they don't have to label it. And then they add the bleach to get rid of the discoloration. All right, light, regular light that's all around you. We're not talking about the sun. We're talking about any kind of light is going to knock electrons, create free radicals. And most oils, almost all oils now are sold in clear bottles. And so they're susceptible to the light. Or if you think of fast food, if you're Chick-fil-A, hopefully you're giving that up for 30 days. You can do that as your next 30 days. Or you can, keep giving up that junk food and or do the oil-free cooking for 30 days. It really is a game changer. You still have the flavor in your food. Anyway, except for olive oil, almost all the bottles are light, but even the ones that are dark, it's got oxidation in it. It's just the light bottles create even more oxidation. But at fast food, it's this huge vat that's just exposed to light and oxygen from the air. And so oxygen, this is why we breathe in oxygen. Oxygen loves electrons. It wants the electrons from your food. All the oils that are exposed to oxygen. So the deep frying. So I've had students say, so I use one of those air fryers. I don't have an air fryer. I don't know much about them. The thing is they are using a high temperature. So you're getting away from the oil as long as you're not adding oil to your food. And that's the problem, is most people are still using oil in their food. And I think the temperatures those are going to are above the temperature that I was mentioning, but I don't know about enough to answer that for sure at this moment. The fourth one is a lot of vitamins no longer add certain metals because they cause this problem. So vitamins aren't the best thing. Eating apples, berries, and stuff are much better for you, but a lot of high-end, like really much better vitamins, they would not use. They don't have iron in them because they notice for women, virtually women never have heart attacks before menopause. There's few exceptions where it's a hereditary, a genetic thing. That's like really exceptional. And it is because women have lower iron levels because they're monthly having a cleanse of blood. After menopause, your iron levels, because you're not losing blood every month, it's such a small amount, but your iron levels will go up a wee bit, and that makes heart attacks more prevalent in women after menopause. There's also a connection with the decrease in estrogen at menopause with that. And so cooking in a cast iron, I have a cast iron skillet. It's beautiful. It's my mom has them. When I'm at her house, I use them. I don't use them every day. So you don't want to use them every day. And if you look at it, if you left that cast iron skillet out in the snow this week, and then you got it, it would be all rusty. And it's because the iron does that, and you don't want that happening to your food. And if you're eating oils or anything that has oils in it, and again, just look at the food label. Maybe you've all done that already because I can't see any of you. Just sit there. And that was the part, like I said, when I analyzed, looked at the protein shake somebody sent me, I'm like, oh my gosh, where do we start with the fact that it has like 3 fake sugars and like all these oils in different places? And so that is likened to to smoking cigarettes. It's just oxidation city. And this is something from my nutrition teacher 25 years ago. Anything that has PUFAs has to be kept cold and dark. So PUFA again means polyunsaturated fatty acids. That would be true for MUFAs also. That if one, I don't have oils in my house. I do actually because I made soap. So I had some olive oil and but seeds and nuts, I keep them in mason jars so I can close them really tight, and they're kept in my refrigerator. My teacher also said rice and flours, so all of your whole grains have to be kept refrigerated, at which point myself and the guy who was sat next to me, who was married to a Tibetan gal, both said, how big is your refrigerator? And nobody else had that response. And I realized many years later, it was because we were each married to somebody who was from a traditional Asian culture, like really the Tibetans and the Sherpas live high in, on the farmland and stuff. And so we were eating real food. And the rest of our class 25 years ago, even though we were in school for acupuncture, for like alternative healthcare, they were eating crap. I remember looking at what people were eating in the class, and it didn't fully connect with me, but, and they were always stressed, and they were always sick, but yeah, everything is made with PUFAs, unfortunately now, processed food. Really, I kept this line in there because I do keep my, a lot of my flours and things in the refrigerator. We got a second refrigerator for that purpose. But nuts, oils, you shouldn't have any oils. There's no safe oils, absolutely not. Whole grains, fish, of course, and seeds. My nuts and seeds and fish, of course, are kept in the fridge, and some of the grains, not all of them. The other thing that I usually mention here is, if you think about it, where do most people keep their cooking oil? One, you got to get rid of the cooking oil. Most people keep it above the stove, the hottest place in the house. Above the stove is super hot. Just ponder what should be above there. It should just be bowls and stuff. Or just keep eating real food. Because, yeah. Anyway, so these are processed to death. They've been processed, they've been heated to high temperature, and then again, they add bleach. And actually, it's interesting because this slide's from several years ago. I didn't make it, but there's tons of these pictures, and there's so much now misinformation about it. But free radicals steal electrons from your body, and they're just bad, and they're a buzzword now. And they are caused, so the sunshine does cause them. However, our body has a way to protect from that. Pollution, absolutely. Cigarette smokes, it's something like every puff is billions of free radicals. Stress creates free radicals in you. We'll talk about that. Stress is actually the biggest cause of it. And then, of course, poor nutrition, meaning processed food, is going to create free radicals in every type of disease. It just says further complications because you could not list it, but I list them here. And basically aging, these guys age you faster. inside and out. We can't see what's going on inside of us, but the outside starts showing it. But our body heals. Our immunity becomes weakened. You can't eat fast food when you're not feeling good. And what happened for the past 2 years when we had this pandemic is people ate more and more crappy food, and their immune systems got more and more depleted. And they asked, why? What's going on? Or people, right, who are wearing the mask and then they're drinking the Starbucks and eating the French fries. Mask isn't going to protect what you're putting inside. So your blood vessels are damaged, your mitochondria. And a lot of this has to do with where your body puts the fatty acids that you eat. And so these are highly compromised fatty acids, and they put a lot of them in your mitochondria, because your mitochondria has that double membrane. For those of you who've taken the biochemistry or more biology, mitochondria has a double membrane, and there's studies now that are showing what's in those mitochondria membranes are a perfect indication of longevity and stuff. Your red blood cells are weakened. They actually make you store more fat. Your thyroid is depleted. And so we can put you on medication. But again, the medication, how's it going to really help if you're not taking away the cause? You're just looking at the low thyroid function as an effect of why you're feeling tired. But if you're not going to really look at what caused your thyroid to be depleted, which is a problem even in natural health, that they don't really take it the next step. Membranes, like everything, it just causes everything. Cancer, Alzheimer's, cancer, cardiovascular, cancer, Alzheimer's, everything. And so wouldn't it be great if McDonald's, but they would deep fry these. I think Burgerville did have asparagus when asparagus came into the season, but they were deeply breaded and then deep fried. So you had the frying, you had the breading. It was just not good. Or just eat berries. You can't only eat berries. You have to eat more than berries. You're gonna eat nuts. That's just shown them eating whole nuts. This is a picture here for a reason. So this is your cell membrane. So as you take biochem, we look at this quite a bit. I could do a whole term on just the beauty of the cell membrane. Our cell membrane is the walls around every cell. It's not a cell wall, but it's a membrane, but we think of it like that. And again, you want that integrity. So think of the house you live in, or your bedroom, whatever room you're in, or your body, right? And you want that wall to have integrity. It's called fluid because remember all those kinky double bonds? They allow this as a mosaic. So imagine your walls actually can move around and flow and but you don't want holes in them. And that's what the free radicals do. And they compromise and they start being in there. This is how we communicate between cells. Those big purple blobs are receptors. So one of those would be like insulin would bind. Insulin never goes in your cells. Insulin just says to the cell membrane, hey, get the boats ready to bring food in. And so food comes in through these boats that carry the glucose into the cell. And so that's just a picture. This is like one of the most beautiful things there is. And so what you guys are doing for these 7 days, it depends how much you want to embrace this, but you're going to try and go oil free. So if you cook with oil, can you go without oil? Again, it was a game changer for me. I do all the cooking. I have been for forever and ever. And so I do a lot of spices, not just spicy, but spices. And I said, there's no way with curry. That's how you pull the spice out of the curry. And then John from yoga invited us over and showed us how to cook, and his food is phenomenal. And yeah, so soup broth or water. You just have to have everything prepared. And you just do a quick stir fry. Soups, you do not need to. Actually, another thing that actually really works is mushrooms. So if you put the mushrooms in first, you don't need any water, anything. You put the mushrooms in first, and the water comes out of the mushrooms. Mushrooms must be like 95% water. And that will actually, and then you can throw the onions in and stuff. And so water doesn't go to a high temperature. Water boils at 100. And yeah. Anyway, soups, you're using water anyway. There's no reason that you have to fry the onions in oil to do that. Again, there's no healthy oil. So the one side shows whole food. Why would you take whole food and either fry it up so it becomes unhealthy or cover it with oils that are actually processed? All oils are. So I have on the handout, I did open the week 3 folder. On there is one of the things I made, which is a sesame dressing. So you can make your own. So that could be what you do, is like, you're like, I love salads. You have to make your own salad dressing because there's none in the stores that I have found. The more I read the labels, the worse they're becoming. So they add a lot of sugar. The vinaigrettes have become the worst there are. They just add a lot of sugar. They add oil, which is going to be refined. You can just Google salad dressing recipe, and anywhere they call for oil, you just use water instead, and you won't notice the difference. You can add a fat. So tahini is sesame, so it's found wherever you find peanut butter, but it's always on the top shelf. So unless you're really tall, you're going to be looking up for it, but most people don't know what tahini is. You just need a little bit, and so that adds a healthy fat. That's not going to be processed. Mustard, most mustards are really just vinegar and mustard. The honey's optional. I usually forget to add the honey, but you can make, so this is apparently a honey mustard dressing. And then you can add whatever seasonings you like, or you can use avocado instead of the tahini. What I do a lot of mornings is when I make my smoothie, I just put some of the smoothie on the salad, add some vinegar and then spices. And that's actually made it really easy. So I make my salad as I'm making my smoothie. And anyway, some substitutes. Coconut oil. Okay, I have time. I don't think coconut oil is a healthy substitute, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Applesauce is one. Pumpkin is another one. That was what was in bananas, and pumpkin was what I used. I think those last 3, the vegetarian butter sticks and stuff, those are crap. And so that's why I have the slide here, because I don't agree with it at all. And so that's why I said cast out the evil. Bananas. You just use a ripe banana in place of the oil in your baking. You just mush it up, or you can use pumpkin, avocado. I've never done the avocado, pumpkin applesauce. But the number one thing, Rocky's like, he loves when I use avocados because he gets the shell. The number one thing that the fairies told me, they whispered in my ear, is the liquid. It's called aquafaba. So aqua is water and faba means bean in Latin. Chickpeas especially, if you open a can of beans or if you make your own beans, when you finish that water at the bottom, if you have a lot of water, you might have to condense it down, but always save that water. Just put it in another little mason jar and you can label it. And black beans, same thing, any kind of beans. But that liquid, it's a perfect substitute for oil, and it's not oil. And I don't know why, and everything, I haven't actually made anything for you with it this term because my schedule, I haven't had time to make chickpeas, but actually, anyway, so it actually, everything I've made for my mom's church group, I would make. These are all 80-year-olds. They're like, oh my gosh, your cookies are always the best. And it's anything, I always have the aquafaba in, and I don't know why. So it's finger looking good, I guess. And so the yes that you're going to incorporate, because as I found from my other class, if you stop doing something, you start having cravings, is you're going to be eating seeds and nuts or healthy fats, avocado, and these are all raw. You can't cook with them. And it's a handful. So it could be on your salad or in your smoothie, a handful of nuts. You can't eat the shell because of how our digestion works. But you can make a fun hat with the avocado skin. And the thing that's interesting, these do have polyunsaturated. They get processed to make the oils, but you could do peanut butter if that's your thing, or almond butter. You gotta keep them refrigerated. Mother Nature kept them in shells that kept them safe from oxidation. And so all these beautiful little rodents would not open the shell until they were ready to eat it. Right, so that's your 7-day challenge. And you get to also make a healthy recipe. So something new. So if you had something, an old favorite, and it used a lot of oils or baking, you're going to modify the recipe. So include the old recipe and tell me how you modified, or try a new recipe, or do a handful of nuts or seeds in with your breakfast, or mix it with the berries, right? So you're not overeating it, because too much of the fats could cause issues. And some people have sensitivities, definitely. Like almonds, I had a while where I had issues. Almonds cause severe bloating for me because they're really high I can't believe I'm forgetting it. Anyway, this slide, we'll move on so I can do the coconut thing, is this slide just cracks me up. I did not make it, but it was, I can't remember. It was, oh, it tells me at the bottom. Yeah, it's Harvard. I was thinking it was Harvard said, these are healthy substitutes for trans fats. And I agree with them 0%. And so they're saying to use liquid vegetable oils are really good for you, and they are not. They're free radical city. That's what I just went through. You guys are doing food ads. Microwave popcorn's really bad for you. There's something in it, and I can't remember what it is. I think it might be, I don't know. Anyway, this picture there shows that other countries got rid of their trans fats. This is showing how much trans fats were in chicken nuggets and French fries. Apparently now we're all like at Denmark. This is like 10 years ago, before the ban happened. And the thing that's really weird is it's different amount in different cities in the US and different countries, but Denmark has socialized healthcare, and they didn't want to have to pay to take care of heart disease. But again, they're deep frying all this stuff. That's a cartoon I did not make, but if your donuts are deep fried, they're going to have trans, they're going to have they're going to have oxidized fats. So none of these are healthy. The Oreos, you're trying to say this is a healthy way to make an Oreo. There is not. And yeah, sorry, Harvard got that wrong. This was just something I'd read. I don't remember whose book. I think it might have been Dr. Greger's. And this is before COVID. And it claimed that the number of people who eat fast food in the US several times a week is 16%. I'm sure that's at least double now. This is several times a week. And something I usually mention is the people I really feel for are the workers. So carpenters, electricians, because they're out there on their job, the HVAC guys. And so they just always grab a quick lunch. Since COVID, the lines, lunchtime, dinner time, breakfast time at all of these. So I don't know how it can only be 16%, except there's people like me who never eat any fast food. And they say this increases their chance, it almost doubles their rate of heart disease. People who said, and this is also people didn't want to admit, the other thing that's really hard for me is in the younger age groups. So high school and college and 20s, number of people go out and eat fast food. And now after COVID, when like 70% of non-fast food, non-chain restaurants got closed, this number is even higher. I don't know if any of you noticed, I dressed in black and white to be a penguin today for the snow. But once a month was 80%, which I don't know, I think that's once a week for most people. And never ever, those of us who say we don't eat fast food, there's only 4 of us, 4% of us, 4 of us. I think there's more than 4 of me out there. And so Harvard estimates we'd see a 90%. We'd virtually eliminate heart disease if we adopt a healthier lifestyle. It's so simple, but we have a pill for it instead. And people are willing to take the pill for their life with all of its side effects than to just say no to all this highly processed. We said the same thing, though, about smoking in 1950s. So apparently little bit less than half the population smoked in 1950, and today, 1964, is when they said this is bad for you. Like the government really came out behind that. It's less than 20%. I don't know if the numbers went up with COVID. Hardest part for me with fast food is how it's marketed to children. It's just wrong. And how in inner cities, that's all they have source. And that's the whole thing. This book, I highly recommend. And I'll talk about Joel Furman more in a couple of weeks. Is he talks about how in inner cities, they actually have no access to fresh food. And so the only fresh food they're getting is, and it doesn't look like this, the tomato is a wimpy tomato on the Big Mac. And so, right, you have a choice. So eating real. So I do have time to talk about the coconut oil conundrum. So coconut oil's being pushed as like really healthy for you. And these are like all the things. And I used to talk about this. I've taught for over 20 years. And I used to have students say I should get stock in coconut oil. And then I went through the vortex. And this is a huge fad right now. They've actually isolated one of the oils, fatty acids from there. So they found during World War II, when they couldn't feed the cows, some farmers were trying to fatten up their cows faster for slaughter. And so they started feeding them coconut oil because they thought it would fatten them up. And the cows became lean, mean fighting machines. And they pondered why. And so coconut oil does have, it has very special fatty acids. They're medium chain. They're not longer chain like you find in animal saturated fatty acids. And those medium chain ones seem to promote our metabolism, so increasing our metabolic rate. And so there's this whole fad. It's called MCT oil. You'll find it now everywhere. It's shown up in the past couple of years, and people add it to their coffees. Bulletproof is this guy out of, and keto is big into it. They're like MCT, you make hot chocolate, you do all this stuff, and you have to add the oil and the grass-fed butter. This is actually in Nepal. We had not seen a human being for like 4 days, and we came over the pass and we found these yak herders. You can see they are living in the humblest of humble, and they just invited us in and made us food and made us butter tea. They stopped what they're doing. They're wearing flip-flops. We're pretty high up, and yeah. Anyway, if I stumbled into somebody's campsite, they're not going to do that. And so I went in, this was 4 years ago. And my doctor first, I turned to her, I think she wanted me to just have my blood drawn to just see what all my numbers were, which were phenomenal. And the only thing came with the star were two things. My vitamin D was low, which happens if your cholesterol is high. So I had actually cholesterol above 200. And I was like, that's interesting. And I didn't dwell on it. I didn't go back to the doctor. I was like, I wonder why that was. And I used coconut oil and everything. And then I happened upon a thing about how coconut oil affects your cholesterol. And that's a picture of me and two other chemistry teachers. And I'm just not wanting to know that coconut oil, but it is refined. You're not eating the whole coconut. It's very different. So this is a picture of bunnies. And so this is the first bunny is just the regular food with olive oil added. And the next bunny is the food with coconut oil, and then even higher coconut oil. And the deep red is the plaque forming, the clotting forming in these arteries of the poor bunnies. All the bunnies had to be killed, unfortunately, when they do this. That's a whole nother story. But basically, what they found was the level of cholesterol in the bunnies who had the coconut oil. There's no cholesterol in coconut oil. It's a plant-based food, was double the ones that were fed olive oil. And their triglycerides were 20-fold higher. So they were given the same amount of coconut and olive oil, but yeah. Anyway, and they also showed insulin resistance, which is prediabetes, high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high insulin levels. They were not giving them sugar, they were giving them coconut oil, this happy oil that we all think is wonderful. And so that's me not wanting to let go. I'm a little monkey there. And so this is an area of India, southern tip of India, which has the highest consumption of coconuts in the world, in India, and I think maybe in the world, at least in India. They eat all the parts of the coconut, every bit, and they have the highest levels of cholesterol in India. India, right? How do people in India have high cholesterol? And highest rates of diabetes and metabolic syndrome and heart disease. They actually have double the rate of high cholesterol as the United States. This area of India, it had nothing to do with how much money. It's not a rich area of India. Sri Lanka, which is this island off of India, 80% of their fat comes from coconut oil, and they also have high rates of cardiovascular disease. And they found out, more research is that coconut oil actually raises your cholesterol as well, possibly better than butter and meat. And I haven't had my cholesterol checked again, but I gave this talk 4 years ago when I first found out. And the gal who sat in my front row, who'd been with me the whole year, she was just sitting there and her eyes just kept getting bigger and bigger because she was like 25, 28, and her husband, who was also young, he had just gotten his blood tested and he came out with high cholesterol and they could not figure out why. And I've met him, he was very healthy, but he had high cholesterol. And he was in that MCT oil fad. He was drinking it in his coffee every day. And she's like, oh my gosh. And so I don't know if she's like, she like was texting him and saying, you can't have that anymore. I think this is what's going on with your cholesterol. So anyway, this is what I want you guys to do when you pick your topic. Is it could be something we all think is healthy, or it could be anyway. I want you to look into the additive, and you might have to pick a topic you can change. It's in 2 weeks we're doing the presentation. Olive oil is promoted if you're going to have an oil, you're not cooking with it. And it has to do with olives, you press them instead of processing them. And so it has to be the extra virgin olive oil. I do not do olive oil. So if you have olive oil, you can make soap or get zippers unstuck or put it in your hair. Olive oil also has a phytonutrient that's only found in olives. I do eat olives, eat the whole olives, which are heavenly. But I still believe the olive oil, it is better than any of the other oils. In the Mediterranean areas, Mediterranean diet, they do use olive oil. They're getting it extremely fresh. Always only one pressing, and they never I don't think they cook with it, or they would just dip their bread in it. And so very different. And these are healthy people. Somebody's not healthy, absolutely no. Somebody's diabetic, absolutely no. If you were healthy and you were using a little bit of olive oil, and it has to be high quality extra virgin olive oil, you're paying for what you get. So again, you're giving up oils. Avocados, yeah, I mean, if you want and you want to do your thing on avocados and stuff, we can talk about that. This is just there to remind you that could be your healthy fat this week, and it's not eating 10 a day. You have like one or half of one a day. The problem is learning how to make avocados ripen correctly. And there's lots of stuff online, so they won't turn brown and then they're just gross. And this is probably one of the easiest ways is once you cut the avocado, you do leave the pit in and you leave it with a cut onion. That's an onion that's cut. And then you cover it. And you leave it in the fridge. And it's something to do with the sulfur products that are given off from the onion will keep it from going brown as fast. If you want to ripen it, you put it into a brown paper bag with apples, because apples are giving off a different substance that helps to ripen things. So if you're getting your avocados are hard. And then the last thing, assuming my clock is right next to me, is so the long chain fatty acids are what our body stores fatty acids. Most of the stuff you're getting are long chain fatty acids in the oils and the fats and everything. Coconut oil is special because the medium chain, and having coconut once in a while, having some coconut milk curry, it's just how much. And the oil, I cannot tell you to use because of not just mine, but somebody else I know who had it. And we all have different bodies, so it might just be my body. But there's also a third class fatty acid, and they are short chain. So these are 4 or 6, and that's a picture of them. And so these kinks are carbons, and so they're small fatty acids. You cannot get them from the outside. They've tried. These are the magic bullet. These fatty acids are what turns off your hunger signal. They have been looking for the magic bullet that makes you not want to eat more, that satisfies you, and they found it. The problem is it has to be made inside of you. And the picture of the microbiota in the background is your microbiota makes short chain fatty acids, and then that goes to your brain and says, I'm satisfied. I don't need to eat. I don't have cravings. And so it's not eating fat that's going to make your microbiota make these. It's eating fiber. And it can't be the fiber, the sawdust that's added to stuff like Fruit Loops or protein drinks or whatever they're adding it to. It has to come from fruit and beans, legumes. Do the legume talk eventually. And let me just see what else I have on this. Oh, it's just your microbiota. We're going to do a talk on that also, that it feeds your brain, it communicates with your whole system, so your digestion works more effectively, your immune system works. And so again, beans and fruit. And here we go. We can always show you a happy birthday. He's the birthday boy. And just a reminder, so you get to eat, your beans. I'm sorry, not your beans, your a handful of nuts and seeds a day or avocados, and you're cutting out the oils. So, stop recording.